All right. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for coming to our press conference. We're the Plant-Based Treaty Initiative. We are advocating for food system change, and I would like to introduce to you my fellow colleagues. So here we have Nilgün from Turkey, Hoshimi Sakai from Japan, Aprajita from India, and Raphael Potzelver from Germany. And my name is Maximilian Weiss from Germany as well. The Plant-Based Treaty is a bottom-up grassroots initiative to call for a plant-based food system to move away from animal production, which is a very, very crucial part of stopping the worst consequences of climate change, really. And in the last years, more and more studies and more data is coming out about the extremely destructive effects of animal agriculture. And one of the most important metric, actually, to measure the effects of animal agriculture is land use. Land use change, it's a planetary boundary set up by the Stockholm Center for Resilience. So that's an institution that does a lot of research on planetary boundaries, and they defined 9 planetary boundaries. Among them is climate change, freshwater use, biodiversity, and also land use change. And if we look at land use change, a staggering 3/4 of it are caused by animal agriculture. So that's mind-blowing to me. And 20% of it is for plants for human consumption, and the rest, like 3-4%, is humans building streets and cities and urban development. And along with this planetary boundary, a very important aspect is soil, and it's overlooked in its importance very much. And our press conference today is on the topic why we need healthy soils and why they have to be a crucial part of an agreement like the Plant-Based Treaty. So just recently, a really recommendable book from George Monbiot came out. It's called Regenesis, Feeding the Planet Without Devouring It. And he says, instead of developing new policies to protect our soils, our governments are accelerating their destruction. And soil is critical for our survival, but it's actually treated like dirt. So according to the IPCC, we are losing soils at a rate of 10 times quicker than they're forming. And as I said before, animal agriculture is the main driver of this loss, due to intense monoculture farming to meet the growing demand of animal feed. So based on current trajectories, 90% of the world's soil will be degraded by 2050 if urgent and necessary action is not taken. How will the world look like if 90% of the world's soil will be degraded? I don't think that we can even imagine this. And the status quo looks like this. Almost 52% of the world's soil are already degraded. We are facing mass food insecurity. We are really seeing our food system collapse in front of our eyes. And of course, the global south, who have contributed the least to all of this, they will be hit the hardest. And I think we can already see it in places like Eastern Africa, Madagascar, and all of these countries that are having trouble with feeding their population at the moment. So, in order to graze animals or intensively farm these monocultures that I already talked about, we're talking about soy, for example, in South America, but also corn. Land is really, destroyed by stripping it, tilling it again and again, and using intense amounts of fertilizer and animal manure. And so this really depletes the soils of their nutrients and biological functions, creating on a reliance on increasing amounts of agrochemicals, which harm biodiversity severely, but we'll come to that later. And Aprajita, do you want to tell us a little bit about what we can do to save our soils?
Thank you, Max. So I would like to start with a very normal thing. For example, the soil. The solution of a problem lies in its root. But we actually don't mean it, really, because we don't relate it with the real problem. So day by day, we see our soil health is going down, and we are finding and researching new ways to grow crops. Day by day, the population is increasing, and the land we need for growing crops is getting degraded. Day by day, we see new science projects, alternatives, innovation for new farming. But down there, our feet, the land is turning barren. Talking about the roots, what if the roots are weak? What if they are craving for healthier life? That's true. With the quality of soil we have at present, it's difficult to get nutrient-rich yield. Climate change, animal agriculture, and many other factors plays a major role in depleting soil quality. There is more blood than bacteria, more fur than less fertile, and more plastic than potassium. We are disturbing the natural soil regeneration cycle through deforestation, replacing replacing the crop with animal agriculture. So the soil is the second largest carbon sink after ocean. It holds great potential to capture carbon dioxide from air. With the soil quality we have right now at the moment is concerning, whether the soil can do it the same thing in future or not. As recommended by IPCC, there is an urgent need to control the food system and regulate and balance crop production for consumption. So animal agriculture is potential reason for climate degradation. So right now, we just have one hope, that is turning 100% plant-based to save our planet. If not done now, then the soil won't have even much nutrition as it holds now. So let us consider soil as a patient. As we know, anyone or anything can be cured at a certain stage. The climate crisis that we are facing today is tremendous. So it's standing exactly on the needle of now or never. At a plant-based food system, we includes an alter every element in its course will bring remarkable changes. More demand, more supply, more plants need more agricultural land. This will lead to replacing animal agriculture with plantations, and slowly the natural cycle of the soil will be back. So let's consider this fact that quality of fruits and veggies which we used to see in our childhood is not available at the moment. And we tend to buy organically grown or professionally grown crops. The green tea which is grown at our home tastes better, and we should consider this our earth, our home, but not let it treat and let's treat it as one. Thank you.
Thank you, Aprajita. And speaking of soil as an important carbon storage, I also want to touch on a subject that's often used to propagate animal agriculture, actually. And for example, in my home, Germany, I come from Bavaria, we have a lot of pasture, a lot of cows grazing there, and lobbyists for animal agriculture and farmers, they often say, but we need these animals there to capture the carbon into the soil, which is really not true, because there's an important study came out in 2018, I believe, called Grazed and Confused. It's a meta study, and so they took many studies and looked at the results, and if animal manure is actually a good way to lock and store carbon in our soils, and it is not, because especially on land that has been used for grazing for a very long time, which is the case, for example, in my home, there's an equilibrium, so the soil cannot store any more carbon, and yeah, so there's really that's really an important thing we have to know in order to be able to debunk these claims that animal agriculture is such an important plays such an important role in storing and drawing down carbon. All right. Now we come to the topic biodiversity, another myth propagated by the animal agriculture industry, that we need ruminant animals for biodiversity. They're great, right? Nilgün, can you tell me a little bit about it?
Yeah, thank you, Max. Studies demonstrate consistently that grazing animals on land are significantly detrimental to the wider ecosystem. There's no exception regarding using so-called regenerative approaches. A review article found that the abundance and diversity of almost all animal groups increased once grazing animals were removed. Where cattle were grazing, there were fewer wild mammals, birds, reptiles, insects, even few fish in the rivers. To improve soil health, an important shift in dietary demand is needed, moving away from meat and dairy and towards plant-based diets, which is a step recommended by leading scientists. It is also critical to move away from monoculture-based farming because it actively degrades soils. We need restorative, regenerative, and sustainable means of production. This way of farming actively enhances the local ecosystem. Many steps can be taken to enhance rather than deplete the soil. We can use diverse mix of crops. We can rotate the crops. We can adopt some types of organic farming, and even we can create food forests. Ultimately, we need to change the way we approach all forms of farming to sustainable, restorative types of farming that actively improve and protect soils. At the same time, they provide locally grown, nutritious, and resilient food. With a reduction in demand for resource-hungry food types, such as dairy and meat, we can use land to sustainably produce more plant-based food using less land. Global dietary patterns need to converge around diets based more on plants, owing to the disproportionate impact of animal farming on biodiversity, land use, and environment. This is a quote from Chatham House 2020 report. Thank you. And for some solutions.
Thank you, Nilgün. Yeah, I think it's really important when we speak about animal agriculture and climate change that we also address biodiversity, because animal agriculture is the main driver of the collapse of our biodiversity, and it makes a lot of sense, because when you look at it, our forests, the world's forests, are really the most biodiverse areas on the planet, and animal agriculture is the main driver of deforestation. So it's all very much interconnected. So we need to change. What do we need to change? Hoshimi, can you tell us a little bit more about that?
So we need to change the way we farm. Obviously, we need to stop farming animals, because every time we feed, we're thinking, okay, we've been eating animals for centuries, but we forget the fact that in order to eat animals, we have to feed them. So we're like clearing so much land just to raise crops for raising farmed animals. And then mainly the rich countries are the ones who are really high, with the high meat intake, eat dairy and eggs. And so what we need to do is we need to start planting plant foods that we can eat for ourselves and leave animals alone, so that we can actually have different types of, we can have more sustainable, restorative, rotation-based crop farming, plant farming that'll be healthy for the planet and healthy for us as well. And then we don't have to obviously exploit and kill animals, which is a very important point, because otherwise what's the point of thinking about climate change when we're not thinking about all of the living beings on Earth, because we have to exist, like Aprajita said earlier, we're all one on this planet. So shall I continue? Or?
Yeah, do you want to talk a little bit about the plant-based treaty in itself?
Sure, okay. So the plant-based treaty is a global campaign designed to put food systems on the forefront of combating the climate crisis. So basically, we're like a sister treaty to the fossil fuel treaty, which you might have heard of before, the fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty. It's basically modeled on the exact same concept. We have 3 demands, and those 3 demands are, we call them the 3 R's. So number 1, relinquish, number 2, redirect, and number 3 is restore. So starting from number 1, our number 1, relinquish. So the demands are that we stop, we freeze animal agriculture. So no more expansion of existing farms, no more expansion or building of new slaughterhouses, for example, and no land use change. So existing, for example, plant farms cannot be converted into animal farms. So everything must stop. We've stopped the problem first, because that's the root cause of the problem. And number 2 is redirect. So when we redirect, we're transitioning away from animal-based food systems to fully 100% plant-based food systems. And this involves public information campaigns. This involves on so many levels. For example, we can change menus at schools, cafeterias, workplaces, hospitals, prisons, everywhere, so that when you go there to eat, the default menu is already plant-based, how it should be, so that it's healthier for everyone as well. And also a really important point is like food justice. So we want to make healthy plant-based foods accessible to everyone, so that we no longer have to choose between, like an expensive salad and a really cheap fast food, which obviously animal agriculture is heavily subsidized by, governments. So when we use meat, for example, we can introduce a meat tax, and then we can use that money to fund, for example, animal farmers can transition to plant-based farming, and so that we don't have to worry about farmers losing jobs. In fact, we're creating jobs, and maybe even like, a psychologically more pleasant job than trying to, thinking about sending animals to slaughter and things like that. So, so that can be like a smooth transition, and we've listed everything, what we need to do in order for this to happen, so that everyone, regardless of who you are, everyone should have a basic right to have access to healthy plant-based foods. And then, so demand number 3 is restore. So this is the beautiful part, because every sort of thing we're doing for, to fight the climate crisis, we're talking about like mitigation and adaptation and things like that. But plant-based food systems, this is the only thing that can actually not just stop the climate change, but actually we can heal the planet. So we can reverse it. So we're talking about well, today's topic is soil. So as Aprajita mentioned, soil is the second largest carbon sink. So it means we can, all the land that we've freed up from not farming animals, that's like, I can't remember the exact figures, it's like 75% of the land can be freed up. So we can use that to rewild ecosystems.
Thanks so much. So, yeah. If you think that all makes sense, then we would be delighted if you could endorse the treaty, support us. And yeah, we are a grassroots initiative. We have activists in many, many countries on the ground doing amazing work in the streets, talking to people, but also talking to politicians and businesses and so on. And today we have Raphael from ProVeg here, and we just wanted to know from you what other things are happening in the transition to a plant-based food system. So we are like a grassroots initiative. You're also an NGO doing amazing work. What's your take on the whole thing?
Thank you. I think it's a very, very important topic, and I know we have only a few minutes left. So let me say this. I think when working around the UN field in the past years, we saw that we managed to bring like food systems discussion, connecting food and climate change. And this is like the first COP where we already have people calling it the Food Cop27. There's a lot of progress that we have made in bringing the topic here to the table. I think the topic of healthy soils is gaining a lot of importance. I was at also UN Environment this year in February, and I think there was also like a lot of eagerness from UN Environment to talk about healthy soils, to see how we can bring the topic to the table. And as for ProVeg, we promote a transition towards more plant-rich diets, towards diets that are much less dependent on animal source proteins and much more, in a way, plant-rich. I think that the connection is quite evident, and I really hope that, for example, at other forums, typically at UNEA 6 in 1.5 years now, but also like at, connecting also the topic of healthy soils with climate change, as you did here, rightly, because we had the UNFCCC, is also gaining tractions, because it's a topic that we cannot really avoid anymore, I think. And I think in the same way that we managed to get like 4 different pavilions on food, discussions on agriculture on Saturday, etc., at the UNFCCC, I'm sure that we will also have like a lot of discussions on healthy soils in the future. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Raphael. So we're a bit out of time, but I think there's time for 1 or 2 questions, if there are any.
So my question is, what is the long-term plan for the treaty? So once you guys have enough support, would you go to the UN, or I guess what would be the steps forward going?
So the plan is to get just as much support as possible. Just recently, C40 cities like Buenos Aires and Los Angeles have endorsed, and at the moment we are really just getting started. And at the moment, really, like also like Raphael is saying, it's just the main problem is getting the message out there that how important it is, how dramatic the effects of animal agriculture are. And I think once we get going and get more support, then I think there will be amazing synergies between governments, local communities, like cities like Los Angeles, and I think we can't even gauge the effects that it can have actually at the moment. But yeah, I think that Aprajita, you want to add something?
Yeah. So, so we can be a part of treaty at organization level, business level, and institutional level. With that, we want them to bring the change with individual level as well. Like, for example, if we have a school and we have a canteen in that, so we can ask them to shift towards the plant-based food system so that we can take a one step ahead to save our planet. So we can do it at a very individual level. So this is one thing with the plant-based treaty which is really helping us. And going to the mayors, you can build a solution at your local level, because we have different kinds of states and they have different different culture, traditions. So accordingly, we can work on it on the grassroots level. Thank you.
Thanks so much. That's it from us. Yeah, all I can say is eat plants, plant trees. Thank you very much.